Hi, I'm Regan Robinson, your host of Future Fit, the only podcast unraveling the secrets of how the world's most innovative leaders stay future ready in a fast-paced world. I've spent over 20 years as a futurist and strategist, transforming top global brands and putting investment-backed startups on paths to sustainable growth. Along the way, I've become obsessed with new ways to prepare for the future, because thinking about the long term once a year simply isn't enough. In each episode, I talk with movers, shakers, and path breakers who share their stories about how they turn uncertainty into their strategic advantage. Throughout our journey, we'll discover unconventional and imaginative ways to help you thrive today while leading your teams into tomorrow. Future Fit leaders know that being prepared for what's next is more than a business decision. It's a way of being. Let's venture together as we co-create a new future readiness playbook. The future can't wait, and neither can I. So, are you ready to get future fit? Today, I am thrilled to welcome Julie DeLoca, an innovative marketer, storyteller, and brand builder with over 20 years of experience in luxury, fashion, tech, beauty, social good marketing, and advertising. Julie is an agency president and fashion and software CMO known for bringing brand stories to life in unexpected ways for startups to Fortune 500s. And she's the founder and CEO of LOCA Marketing, which provides outsourced CMO and marketing services to brands. Julie has run the marketing departments for global fashion leaders like Rebecca Minkoff and Ellie Tahari, as well as the storied dance brand Capezio, and most recently, SETI, which is a science-backed software company that's redesigning the way fashion goes to market. Before LOCA, Julie developed ad campaigns for top brands at agencies on both coasts. And today she mentors retail and fashion tech companies via the New York Fashion Tech Lab, Springboard Enterprises, and Colgate University's entrepreneurship program. Julie's been a longtime advisor to Spring Place and Spring Studios, which was the official hub of New York Fashion Week for many years, and is also a gorgeous private member club that I used to be a member of, where she creates innovative marketing opportunities and unique programming across their venues. Julie is also active in the nonprofits She's the First and the One Love Foundation, and speaks about fashion tech, women's entrepreneurship, and the future of retail. Talking with Julie always leaves me inspired and stimulated, and so I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to share with us today. So welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Marvelous. The excitement we share. So let's get this party started with something I ask all of my guests, which is, what does future ready mean to you?
It's such an interesting question, and I love that you ask that. For me, future ready actually means being really present. I really think about it in a way of just being curious and creative and thinking about where we are right now in the moment, being open to whatever is going on in the world, what the universe is sending us, even if that's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. But it's really about being present and talking to people and listening to people. And then for me, I take all that information, and my abilities in the marketing space are really about bringing people together and making really unique connections in branding and marketing, putting different brands together, putting people together, putting ideas together that a lot of people might not be thinking about right now.
That is so powerful that to you, it's being present. That really resonates with me, because what you're describing, for me, future readiness is a state of being. And what people don't realize is you're not going to see the future's possibilities if you aren't rooted in yourself. Your brain isn't able to make connections in really unusual and imaginative ways. And so you do have to be very rooted in the present and in your own present self in order to really see things effectively, right? See the signal through the noise. There's so much information. And if you're not actually present, not only in what's happening, but just in yourself and your surroundings, it's actually much harder to do. So that's a great framework. I always tell people it's actually like For me personally, when I'm doing my futures work, it's important to look to the past. I look to the past for insights, look to the present while being present, while also anticipating what the future's possibilities could be. So that I think that's a good segue into my next, which is, as I said, future readiness is a state of being. So it's not just about possessing knowledge or skills, but it's about cultivating a mindset that embraces change and exposing yourself to different ways of thinking and doing. And stimulating your brain to think in unconventional ways actually helps you effectively think about the future. So, how do you get in the groove of keeping an open mind to spark imaginative and future oriented thinking?
I have a really good meditation practice that took me a long time to cultivate, but I'm incredibly consistent about it. It is the first thing I do every morning. And so there's always 20 minutes of meditation. I practice transcendental meditation, but whatever it is that kind of get
Me
grounded.
too, by the way. Fun fact, trained TM. Oh my gosh.
I felt like I needed that training to really force my monkey brain to focus on something or not focus essentially for a little while. And it's been a game changer. And then some kind of movement. I have to walk, work out, Pilates, yoga, pickleball, golf, like something every day, because that really gets my body and my mind in a place where I can be open and receptive to what's going on. And I think what you were saying about you need to really know who you are as a person in order to be prepared for the future. I say that and I counsel brands the same way. And authenticity is so important to who a brand is and makes you ready for the future. You have to know who you are and you have to be really centered and grounded in that and consistent in that. And then you can bring in elements of newness and things that are happening in the world, but still being true to who you are as a person or as a brand are very similar.
Yeah, yeah. Which, by the way, if you're playing pickleball this summer, you know, something that I've been wanting to pick up for a long time.
It's actually so much fun and it's so good for your brain too, because you're out there. First of all, one of the things that is really important for me is to be talking to people of all different ages. And so I am playing pickleball with people in their 20s and 30s and also in their 60s and 70s. And I am having such deep, interesting conversations with some of them, if not on the court, then afterwards. They're people that I might not normally talk to.
Right.
And that is so important because you really learn from everybody that you talk to and you get different perspectives from people of all different ages. I think intergenerational relationships is one of the most important things right now in terms of thinking about where we are and where we're going. As you said, looking at the past is just as important as we're trying to figure out where we're going in the future.
Yeah, I love that. All right. You and me this summer on the pickleball court. I didn't even think about it from the intergenerational perspective, but to your point, getting a diversity of perspectives, it's foundational in my practice as a futurist. You have to bump up against as many different types of people and experiences as you can, because then your brain starts to catalog that stuff. And then that's how you start to make fresh and insightful connections. So building on that, in our last conversation, you and I talked about trusting your gut, and intuition actually adds a unique and invaluable dimension to understanding and shaping a company's future. So for example, intuition is useful when sensing potential risks and opportunities that may not be evident through data and qualitative or quantitative analysis. So it actually helps you make decisions in uncertain conditions, which is often almost always the case when you're dealing with future. So what practices or habits keep your intuition sharp? And then how do they influence your approach to envisioning what's next in your work as a CMO?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I remember we did talk a little bit about data. And I've always said that the data is only good as the person who is interpreting it. And you can make data work for you in any different way. So it, in one sense, goes back to that foundation for a brand, knowing who you are, knowing what your core brand equities are and things like that. But then using your gut instincts there to channel that into the right thing to do. I think you need to be fearless. You need to be creative. You need to be willing to take risks. My fashion experience probably taught me that more than anything else, that the constant newness that we need to create, the need to generate something new that's going on every season, but also be true to the brand and create things that the consumers actually want at the moment or what we
Mm-hmm.
hope they will want going forward. So you have to be really creative and you have to be curious and you have to be willing to take risks. And not everything pans out and everybody, gets panned at one point or another, but
Right.
pivot, and I think you just learn that. You learn that resilience. The more you do it, you just make changes and you come back and you learn from it and your gut gets, a little more fine-tuned the more you do it. I think the more you know yourself, your brand, where your risk levels are, you're
Yeah.
willing to take chances. And that's how you can do something that is disruptive and really creative and different.
Yeah. And I think you really nailed it with your intuition, you said could be finely tuned. Like it could be a finely tuned instrument slash superpower. It's nuanced, right? Very nuanced. It's a complex interplay of experience, knowledge, and subconscious processing that it actually enables you to make decisions without relying solely on overt rational analysis. And for me, it's so important to maintain a sharp intuition because it combines staying informed, hyper awareness, what you were talking about a few moments ago, and then engaging with diverse perspectives, as we've been talking about, and then doing some reflective or other intuition enhancing practices, which we've talked about a few already. And all those together can really enhance your strategic and creative capabilities. And I think it's so underestimated. I don't even think I think it was once I started working mostly with women. Before I was working mostly with men, but it wasn't until I started working with mostly women that I felt like I started tapping into my intuition more because I think we were talking about it. Hey, start to rely on your intuition a bit more. So I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, you really need to trust a little bit of both of those things. We have to bring in the data.
Right.
We need to see what's going on. We need to really understand and collect all the information we can about consumers or about what's going on in the world. But
Mm-hmm.
the way we decide to articulate it for whatever it is that we're doing or for our brands is where that sort of gut instinct comes in. We always talk about the head and the heart. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you have to look at kind of the rational and emotional attributes of everything that you're doing. We used to say that people would buy a BMW or a Mercedes, they would say, because it's emotionally, it's a really sexy, hot car and it's fast and it's fun to drive. But
Mm-hmm.
rationally, it's very safe and you trust that you can drive your children around in it or whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a little bit of both of those elements in there, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like Maslow's pyramid. Like, how are you hitting as a brand, any kind of brand, really all those different need states? Because we are complex people these days. Well, I think we've probably always been, but right.
Yes, yes, yes.
Amazing. I'd love to gears and talk about the concept of the zeitgeist, which for our listeners describes the prevailing trends, moods, attitudes, and cultural climate of a particular moment that can influence multiple aspects of business and society. So the zeitgeist identifies a period specific cultural patterns, but it doesn't necessarily define the period. And what makes it really hard is there can be multiple zeitgeists that can overlap each other in complex ways. But understanding the zeitgeist offers insights into how people think, how they behave, how they interact within their cultural context. And when tapped at the right time, companies can springboard ahead of their competition in many ways, but it is all about timing, like in business and in life. So goes this. So, how do you approach pinpointing or anticipating the cultural zeitgeist? And then, how do you apply these insights or these cultural patterns in your work as a CMO?
It's a heavy question. It feels like I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you what's going to happen next necessarily. But I think for me, I have my hands in a little bit of everything. I always
Mm-hmm.
say I'm like a great cocktail party guest because I can talk to anybody
Mm.
about pretty much any subject. So I know it's a little bit of what's going on in sports, in politics, in history, in news, in fashion, in music, in film, TV, all of it. And a lot of that comes from, as I said, talking to people of all different ages So listening to kids, and I have teenagers, so understanding what they're doing and listening to and interested in right now and the way they think. And then
Mm-hmm.
also older people and their perspectives on those things. And then so much of it is listening. We don't really listen to each other very much as a community anymore. And we are
Mm-hmm.
actually at a huge inflection point right now in our discourse and really dislike of one another. We're not listening. We're not talking to people. And so I look at all of those things now and it helps me figure out where we're going next. Like I could probably guess for you fashion trends and music and film just based on our political systems right now and like the hostilities that are going on in the world. We're going to start
Mm-hmm.
seeing more combat boots, and punk rock music is probably going to have a resurgence. Country music is having a huge resurgence right now.
Yeah, Beyonce.
And then think about like where we're going from there. What's the next step after that? That's where sort of the zeitgeist piece of it comes from. Like we're in the thick of it now. And then
Mm-hmm.
what happens when we try and get over that hump? I look at what people are talking about, what's happening in the world, and then I try and think about what's the response going to be, or what do we want it to be? And then where do we go from there? How do we get to the
Mm-hmm.
other side of where we are right now?
Yeah, those are really, I love those very like simple and easy to understand questions. I think that's a really good framework. And I'd maybe build on that because when I work with leaders to help them think about the long term of their company, one area that I focus on heavily is what I call paradigm shifts, right? So that's when our changes in people's attitudes, beliefs, perceptions, and ultimately actions about something. So, as I like to say, it's like exchanging an old, outdated map for a new, more accurate one. And the question that I always challenge leaders to ask is what could the world be ready for? Because again, back to the sort of a notion of timing, it is all about timing because the zeitgeist is actually, it's another word might be a macro force, right? Everybody knows it's happening, it's all in front of us, but then there are nuances in it and there are components of it that are maybe faster or more ahead of that big, like mindfulness and mental health might be a zeitgeist that would describe our current time. But then how do you get at what's underneath it or what's emerging?
Yeah, I think it's a good point because the zeitgeist is not really a trend. It's a much bigger, like a paradigm shift, as you were saying. It's bigger and broader about what's going on in the world and the way people
Mm-hmm.
are thinking and moving going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to assess those things, because once you see a trend, it's probably over and it's too
Right.
late.
Could be too late.
Whereas
Yeah.
like understanding the zeitgeist is like riding a huge wave if you surf or something like that. Really,
Yeah.
and then you not only see where the wave is going, but how you're going to ride it and where you're going to end up. Am I going to hit those rocks? Am I going to hit the beach? Do I need to dive? I'm a terrible
Right.
surfer. I'm not sure why I'm using a surf analogy, but
No, the surfing metaphor is actually great. I actually use that a lot when I describe the work that I do and that I help others do. It's like it's anticipatory. And a
yeah.
great surfer is able to anticipate where the next break could be, or to your point, hopefully avoiding the rocks. So I actually think that's a very apt metaphor for people, or a brain surgeon, like a brain surgeon, the way that he anticipates or she when they are performing their surgery is a similar inherent way of working, if you will.
It has a lot to do with flow. I don't know if you ever talk about flow states, but
Oh yeah.
I think when you're really good at something and you really know what your abilities are and you
Mm-hmm.
get so focused on it, you can do those things without really thinking about them. And you
Yes.
make the right decisions without going through all the data and all the necessary steps. Like those surfers don't have time to evaluate the wave. They actually just do it instinctually because they know their abilities, the size of their board, where they're going, the temperature, all of that kind of stuff. And so it really goes back to, I always say there's 5 core elements of a great brand. It's authenticity, consistency, community, engagement, and disruption. And if you
Mm.
have all of those things, if you have an authentic and unique brand positioning, you have consistency in your messaging and your look and your feel, you have a great community of brand evangelists and loyalists, you've got
Mm-hmm.
an engagement strategy, communication strategy that is social, active, and engaging. And then you can be disruptive in your messaging because you're going to be consistent in all of the other elements. Then utilize trends in a certain way. Is a brand that is incredibly consistent in who they are. They know exactly who they are. Their brand positioning doesn't change, yet somehow they manage to blow our minds with new technology every couple of years.
Right.
And they can take risks on things that, other people don't.
Yeah. But I think to your point that it's because they built that consistency with their community, building that trust,
loyalty, yep,
operating from an authentic place. And that's why I love that framework that you just named, all of those sort of elements. It's hard. Like it's hard to do all of those things, but I think you just illustrated how the power of when you actually do hit all of those notes correctly, if you will, that it does give you license to experiment more. And I love the idea of disruption through messaging versus something else, because I personally think disruption is a word that has jumped the shark.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't mean anything anymore. Everybody says they're disruptive, and you're like, oh, what does that mean? And I think it's an important reminder for people that disruption in messaging, communications, storytelling, that can be a leapfrogging element for brands as well.
It could be imagery, it can be spokespeople, it could be leadership of a brand. There's a lot of different ways disruption can be an internal marketing tool. There's a reason why the word has jumped the shark, because everybody uses it, because it is really so integral to what we do. But you are right. And I try not to use it in that old-fashioned kind of way. But I think it's important to keep in mind that's the future part, right? Like we've got the brand foundation, but then we've always got to create that newness going forward.
Yeah. What's coming up for me, speaking of paradigm shifts, one of my favorite business cases to share is what Rihanna and her team at Savage Fenty have done. They harnessed 3 paradigm shifts brilliantly and at the right time. The first one was a cultural shift, where consumers began embracing a beauty inclusive mindset versus a beauty is size 0. There was a customer paradigm shift, where customers started prioritizing the privacy and convenience that comes with online shopping versus going into a lingerie store. And then there was actually an industry paradigm shift, where you probably know a heck of a lot more about this than me, where really the way of fulfillment was centralized, and then it shifted to distributed fulfillment, facilitated obviously by e-com. And now look at Savage Fenty if they haven't already, is usurped the behemoth of Victoria's Secret. I just think that really speaks to the power of paradigm shifts and timing, and really being attuned and hyper aware, like we've been talking about.
Yeah. And so much of that, I think, really comes from who Rihanna is as a celebrity and a person, in her kind of open-mindedness and her risk-taking abilities.
Yeah.
Her fashion shows are mind-blowing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So unique in what they've done. She's created a loyal following. She's created a community of people. They are sharing and talking about what they're doing. It's all those elements that I was just talking about. And the brand is really clear. So even when they go into cosmetics, there's a little bit of that element of it that people are excited. They want a little bit of that. So even if they don't feel like they can wear that brand, then they can use that lip gloss or something like that.
Yeah.
A little piece of it.
Totally. That makes sense. So let's talk about brand purpose, which for our listeners is a company's reason for being, right? Beyond making a profit, obviously. And brands with a clearly articulated purpose are often more agile, we've been talking about, and adaptable, because it does provide a simple framework for evaluating future opportunities and risks. But there's this tension, and this kind of nods to what you were talking about before, but there's this tension between creating an enduring brand purpose that's also flexible enough to adapt to changing market conditions, consumer preferences, these societal shifts we've been talking about. So how do you tackle balancing an enduring brand purpose with the need to be strategically positioned to thrive in the future in your work? And what's been the most challenging or even surprising thing about this balancing act?
Yeah, I know I feel like a broken record, but it keeps going back to that authenticity and that consistency, and really knowing who you are and building the brand foundation in any way, shape, or form. So like one of the things that we do at LOCA that I'm really proud of is that I've taken all my fashion and luxury experience and brought it to social good and philanthropy. And I do that in a way that kind of makes social good sexy, is what I call it, because we know what those projects are. I launched a program with a cardiologist called Hands Only CPR. We just very simply wanted to increase bystander response to sudden cardiac arrest. So in doing that and knowing that we had this very simple mission, very clear, we wanted to simplify the process so that when somebody dropped up a cardiac arrest in a restaurant or on the street, bystanders would step in and start doing chest compressions on them. And so we tapped into different cultural elements in order to do that. The messaging was exactly the same. Check, call, compress. Check to see if they're breathing, call 911, start chest compressions. But we had Victoria's Secret models do it when we first started. We had the sports stars do it. So we had football players and basketball players and baseball players from the Yankees and the Mets and the Giants and the Jets and everybody. And then obviously when Damar Hamlin had a cardiac arrest on the field, the football player from the Buffalo Bills, that sort of brought all of it to life. Where I had my 20-year-old son calling me saying, "Mom, this is what you're always talking about." Do you believe it actually happened? I'm like, yes. So they took care of him in the right way. So I think being very true to the mission, really just trying to encourage people through communities, but using whatever is going on right now, be it sports, politics, fashion, to get people thinking about it. We would be at the Pittsburgh Marathon and we'd be teaching people how to do it. We had Broadway stars do it. The cast of Chicago did a whole campaign for us. And they made light of it. They made it fun and sexy in a Chicago kind of way. But it was all very clear and true to the mission and got the point across to so many different audiences. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So it sounds like you often look to culture and what's happening in culture and those insights and apply that to this foundation, this enduring purpose and mission. And that's really your secret sauce for how in your work, you not only ensure that whatever it is that you're doing, what the brands are doing meets the moment, but is also maybe a step ahead.
Yeah. And purpose is not just for purpose-driven brands. It's not just for
100%
social good. Every brand should have
a purpose
to it. Your why, as a lot of people talk about it in marketing speak. But I think when you're very clear on that mission, as you said, it gives you really good guideposts about who and what you can do, who you can partner with, and who it doesn't make sense to partner with. So if you're a sustainable apparel brand, you're probably not going to partner with a plastic water bottle company or something. I don't know. But you have your core mission there, and you know that there are ways and places that you can go and connections that you can make that are unique and maybe not what people would normally think of in terms of sustainable apparel, but could also take you into another audience that might not be aware of what you're doing. So that it's a little bit of a fine balance, but when you really have clarity on who you are and what's important to you, and your messaging is clear and consistent and enough that you can share it and other brands can learn to articulate it in the same way, then you can further your messaging.
Amazing. So let's talk about the marketing landscape, which evolves very, very quickly between the technology changes, consumer behavior changes, global trends. And this constant flux actually makes it really difficult to anticipate the future and create a steadfast long-term strategy. There's also information overload, which can make separating the signals from the noise, like what's important from what's not, a really tough task. In my prep, I came across a 2022 survey of 300 CMOs globally that revealed 2/3 feel overwhelmed by the volume of data they deal with, and that the average number of data sources used has more than doubled in 2 years. So I'm like, thank God I'm not a CMO anymore. So I'm curious, what gaps or difficulties are you facing when crafting long-term marketing strategies that are essential for building a brand's future trajectory? And what wisdom or insights would you offer to leaders who are struggling with similar challenges?
It's funny. I'm going to find this graphic and send it to you, but it just shows the landscape of data tools that are available for marketing right now. And it's insane. The font is this big. And I went to the Forbes CMO conference last year, and a lot of the talk was about the fact that the CMO has the shortest tenure of anybody in the company in most cases, and that there is so much information out there. And I knew we weren't going to get through a podcast without talking about AI. And I'm sure you probably are utilizing ChatGPT or one of them for your podcast questions and researching your guests and things like that. And it's an amazing tool, but it has to be utilized in the right way. I can spot an AI written cold email in the first two words of it or something in the early parts of a sentence. And so just like other data, that technology is only as good as the people who are feeding the information into it and editing it afterwards. So my teams often want to use AI to create a lot of our work, and I will never let them just put something out there that way. I let everybody experiment with everything, and I want to encourage all of that. But we really need to very carefully evaluate the tools that are out there and make sure that we are editing and managing them in the right ways. There are not a whole lot of shortcuts anymore. There really aren't. I think we are not going to lose sight of human interaction, and we're not going to replace all of us with machines anytime soon, because human beings understand human beings. Whether you're marketing business to consumer, it's all business to human. At this point, we are all speaking to human beings. And so you've got to have that kind of human voice to it. Yes, it's terrible overload. And I, for one, fought it for so long. I do a lot of taking breaks from technology because it can really overwhelm me.
Hello, Mexico.
Yeah, I know. That trip I was really offline, and I told everybody I was offline and do not text unless it's an emergency. Don't reach out to me. Don't assume I'm going to read emails. But also it gave me time to think about what I needed and what I was missing in my practice and what tools I wanted to investigate and learn more about. So this moment, I am actually playing around a lot with AI, with ChatGPT and some of the others, trying to learn more about it, because you really can't just bury your head in the sand with these things. You have to understand them. I work in the technology space and the fashion space. Talk about head and heart and emotional and rational. You really need to understand all of those things and know how to use them as a leader, but also seek out people who are smarter than you. I always say that one of my superpowers is knowing what I don't know and what I'm not really good at. I think you start to learn your strengths and weaknesses after a while. And I'm great at hiring really smart people who teach me more about those things, who make me look smarter. And then I can then mentor them and make them better and help them grow. I love, love, love mentoring young people and working with them in this business. And I learned so much from them. So yeah, all these technology tools, I have my go-to resources for figuring out what I need. And they keep me posted and updated on what's important and help me understand how to use them in the right ways. And then I also temper them too.
Well, what's coming up for me as you were talking is it's clear that you are someone that seeks discomfort, right? Like comfort zones are the enemy of growth. And whether it's trying out a new marketing technique or exploring an unfamiliar market or adopting a new technology, all of these learnings can be invaluable. And a few minutes ago, you said it's not easy. Like you can't, working in the modern landscape, there's no quick fix. There's no easy, like step by step. And the more that people they should have that awareness. But if they don't, FYI, Julie and I are here to tell you that. But the more that people realize, okay, now we recognize this. And so now how do I need to change what I do as a leader so that I can be present while also being future focused? I can play in the short term and the long term. This really ambidextrous mindset is something I talk about a lot. I think it's really the leadership of the future, aka right now.
Absolutely. And I am a lifelong learner and I am a lifelong seeker of discomfort. I've never put it in those terms, but 100%. I tell you the amount of times I've just gotten up and moved to a new place and met all new people or pivoted my career a number of
Yeah.
times, obviously. And I think that's a huge part of being comfortable with taking risks and figuring out the future is this ability to try new things, to experiment, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Creativity and curiosity are really key elements for the leaders of the future.
Yeah, so we are two birds of a feather. There are some things that you've said today that I'm like, yes, or like, oh my gosh. So before I bring our conversation to a close, is there anything else you'd like to add?
You talk about being fearless. I will say that embracing kind of midlife and my age and stage of life at this point
Mm-hmm.
is a big deal. And I recently came back from doing a course at MEA, the Modern Elder Academy. I think you're going to be interviewing Chip Connolly, the founder there.
Yes, I am.
And that was an incredibly eye-opening experience to be around other people, a range of ages from there are people in their late 30s who consider themselves in midlife all the way into their late 70s and
Mhm.
really embracing where we are with change and evolution in our lives
Mhm.
and thinking about what our purpose is. And it just change in a sense over time. I think we get more attuned to who we are as human beings and where we want to go moving forward. Obviously, our needs change in our lives, our people who are dependent on us, what we have to do financially, all kinds of things. But it's a really interesting place to be right now in terms of the way we are embracing this intergenerational idea and
Mhm.
this focus on midlife and thinking about things in a new way. So that's been
Mhm.
really interesting for me to think about
Yeah.
embrace going into the future
Yeah.
because I feel like I have a whole nother half of my life to go. So
Right.
I want to do with it.
Amen. Bravo. We are in the same boat there. So, a final question before you share where our listeners can find you.
Okay.
In your view, is preparing about the future more about managing risks or capitalizing on opportunities?
I think that's an easy layup for me because I don't manage risks. It's all about embracing opportunities. And there are so many opportunities for you to grow and learn and think and have fun and be creative all the time. And all of those things that you latch onto and you try in that way make you smarter and better prepared for the future.
Love that. And with that, where can people go to find out more about you and your work?
You can find a little bit about me at LOCA Marketing, which is my company. It's LOCAMARKETING.com.
Okay.
You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, not really on X all that much, but I'm there. And my email is julie@locamarketing.com. So feel free to reach out. I love to chat with people.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your illuminating insights, Julie. It's been enlightening, and I've just had so much fun going on this journey with you. And pickleball, here we come this summer.
It's a date. And thank you so much for tapping me and helping me think about myself as a future ready thinker. So I really appreciate that.
You're most welcome. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Fit. If you're listening, you're probably future curious. So follow me in my newsletter on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going and share your discoveries with the Future Fit community. And if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, rate, and review Future Fit on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time.